They came for the wreck, as many have before, for the rusted hull that still remembered its passengers, for the stern's collapsed ballroom, and the stubborn tilt of a ship that refused to sit quietly beneath the sea. But what the research team found one August morning changed the language of deep-sea archaeology. Nestled within a shadowed corridor of the Titanic's starboard side, shrouded in silt and a century of salt, was a doorway, a domestic threshold unimaginable in a place that had been both luxury liner and mass grave dot. At first, they thought it was a trick of light. Cameras and sonar play with perception at depth. Beams scatter off flakes of rust and cloud the imagination. Yet the remotely operated vehicle inched forward, and the doorway resolved into timber and metal. A brass knob glinted under films of verdigris. The paneling bore carved detail. Above the doorway, a small transom window remained intact, its glass long blackened. This was carpentry meant for comfort, not cargo. An interior space made to be lived in. They labeled it cautiously a house. That name felt awkward because it insisted on simplicity where reality resisted it. To call the room a house was to impose a single explanation on a pattern that would insist on plural histories. Inside the threshold lay a compact parlor no larger than many coastal cottages, a fireplace with an iron grate, an armoire whose doors hung slightly open, a low table with the ghost of a teacup beside a saucer. Silt drifted through the scene like ash. The arrangement suggested a household paused rather than staged. Conservators recovered items with extreme care. The policy of the scientific team was clear. Every retrieval must be documented. Nothing removed without purpose. Inside the armoire lay a small leather-bound book whose pages were softened but legible, an ashtray pitted with residue, a child's wooden rocking horse with faded paint. A folded letter rested on a cushion. Its ink had bled, but fold lines remained crisp. Each object bore traces of different eras. The wallpaper's floral motif matched patterns popular at the turn of the century. A newspaper fragment, riddled and encrusted, carried a mid-20th century headline. A maker's stamp on a teapot pointed to Staffordshire until the 1930s. Modern synthetic thread showed up in a cushion seam. The room's contents refused to be idealized as a single moment frozen in 1912. No single explanation neatly reconciled these anachronisms. The team proposed several hypotheses. One argued that the cabin represented a shipboard novelty installed by an eccentric passenger or wealthy donor, a Victorian domestic suite meant to mimic home comforts. Another suggested the find was a palimpsest created by repeated human interventions over decades. Items introduced during early salvage operations might have lodged in a breach and later been sealed by falling timbers. A more provocative line of thought proposed that mid-century debris and later maritime drift had found a pocket within the hull where objects accumulated and were preserved by low oxygen and cold. Fieldwork aimed to move debate from speculation to evidence. Laser scanning and photogrammetry recorded the space in millimetric detail. Micromorphology sampled silt layers to reconstruct deposition sequences. Dendrochronology dated timber where possible. Textile analysts traced dyes and weave patterns. Microbiologists analyzed biofilms for human microbiome residues that might point to habitation or handling. The composite picture complicated tidy narratives. The structural carpentry showed craftsmanship consistent with late 19th century joinery, while some fabrics and printed material unambiguously post-dated the ship's loss. Rather than one story, the data suggested accumulation, intervention, and reworking across time. Conservation choices became ethical choices. The Titanic lies under international charters that seek to protect underwater cultural heritage. Descendants of the ship's passengers, maritime authorities, and academics debated fiercely when news of the house reached the surface. For some, The house was an intimate reminder of lives interrupted, an object lesson in ordinary domesticity drowned by catastrophe. For others, any disturbance risked desecration. The research team established a multinational advisory board that included historians, conservators, representatives of descendant communities, and legal scholars. Their deliberations emphasized transparency and restraint. Items at imminent risk would be retrieved. Those stable in situ would remain recorded and monitored. Retrieving delicate artifacts at 3,800 meters requires extraordinary technique. Conservators used pressurized wet labs on the support vessel to stabilize wood and fabric before they dried and split. Desalination baths removed salt crystals that would otherwise rupture fibers. Consolidants were applied to strengthen fragile paint and wood. The rocking horse, hoisted in a custom cradle, revealed a faded stencil beneath its seat. E. O'Malley, 1909. Genealogists traced the name to coastal records that produced possible leads, but not certainties. Each recovered object multiplied questions about ownership, context, and meaning. Public reaction ran a complex gamut. Museums staged exhibitions that recreated the house within controlled galleries, arranging objects with layered timelines and an ethic of transparency. Visitors stood behind glass and read labels that explained scientific methods as much as they described objects. Some found the displays tender and humanizing. A teacup beside a placard about daily routine moved people more than diagrams of the ship's watertight compartments. Others found the spectacle troubling. Was this display an act of commemoration or commodification? Debates flared about the line between education and sensationalism, about whose voices were centered in the telling. The house also reframed academic conversations about marine sites. Archaeologists noted that wrecks are not static archives, but palimpsests shaped by the actions of the living. Currents deposit and remove, salvage disturbs and discards. Modern debris drifts and mingles. Undersea sites become layered repositories where objects from multiple eras can coexist in accidental juxtapositions. The house became a case study in how material culture migrates across contexts and how conservation must contemplate context as process rather than as a fixed origin. Ethics, too, shifted. International oversight that once focused on preventing looting now had to accommodate the complexities of layered assemblages.